So what do the lead hook and the round kick have in common? A lot more than you think. One thing that they have in common is that there's a bunch of people who will tell you that there's only one way to do them. And then there's a bunch of other people who tell you, no, that's not the right way, this is the right way. One of the biggest points of contention with both those things is, what do you do with your foot? Do I turn my foot when I throw the hook? Do I have to turn my foot when I throw the kick? You're probably saying, yeah, obviously, duh, you should. Isn't that what you said in your videos? Well, the truth is you should, but you don't have to, and there's some instances where you shouldn't. All right, so what the hell am I talking about? All right, you throw the hook. Everyone knows where the power comes from. Power doesn't come from your arm, right? You don't punch with your arm, you punch with your hip. You have to turn your hip. So what people do, in order to get you to turn your hip, we tell you to turn your foot. To turn your foot, turn your hip, and let everything turn, and don't use your arm at all. That's the way you do it. You have to turn that foot. Turning the foot helps you throw the hook. That's kind of a lie. It's kind of a lie that we tell you to get you to kind of throw the hook the right way. Because your lead hook probably sucks. When you first start, you probably are pushing your lead hook over there. I have a whole video on explaining why you feel the need to throw it incorrectly. But let's talk about this foot. I tell people, beginners, that they should turn their foot. And then you get a lot of people who will say, you don't actually have to turn your foot, you just have to turn your hip. And that's where the power comes from. And you can throw a hard hook without turning the foot. That. Yeah, we get that. But what they fail to realize, it's one of two things. They don't know what they're talking about. Typically that's the case. When you see someone saying, no, the correct way to do it is this, they don't know what they're talking about. But on this one in particular, I see a lot of guys that do know what they're talking about saying that there's only, one correct way. This flies in the face of reality. When people say on internet forums or even in the gym, they say, no, you actually don't have to turn, you shouldn't turn your foot, you should just know how to turn your hip to add power to that punch. You got to think who we're talking to, right? Not everyone is like a professional fighter or a high-level athlete that understands like how to turn that hip, how to kind of like make that thing go so that they can throw a punch without moving that foot. I think it's a lot of times it's like mid-level trainers or coaches or stuff that they can't really relate to the non-athlete. They're like, just do the hook better and your hook will be better. You got to understand how uncoordinated the average person is, particularly at throwing a very awkward, non-intuitive punch that has a lot of moving parts to it. Marvin Cook said in a video that the turning of the foot is actually a byproduct of a hook thrown the correct way, and I kind of like that way of looking at it. If I throw the hook correctly, my hip turns and maybe my foot does turn, right? But, not everyone... I don't know, man. Just some people just struggle with that. If you tell people to turn their foot and hold their arm real still, you'll end up with this, which is not great. It has no power, but it's better than this. And you tell them to turn their hip, and it's like asking people to dance, and they're like, right? Like, people don't naturally, have any swagger with their hips. That's not for everybody. Everybody doesn't have that. But the truth is, no, you don't have to turn your foot, and your foot doesn't have to turn as a byproduct. Your hip has to turn. That's where the power from that punch comes from. Now, if I'm fading away off a hook and I throw it and let that thing go, you can really crack somebody by putting your whole ass into it. Just boom! That's cool, but you don't have to do that all the time because there's such a thing as hard enough. Which brings me to the kick. You teach beginners that the kick, we teach it in a 4-step process. We teach it like this. We teach step 1, step 2, I stress that step 3 is the foot that's on the floor. And I tell them they turn it 180 degrees. Step 3 is that. All right? And then step 4 is they start out with knee extension. I'm trying to teach them to do this with their hip. But again, people don't really understand how to move their hips. Like maybe if belly dancers started doing MMA, they would get it. But people don't understand how to articulate at the hip. Right? They push themselves back. That step 3, I tell them, is super important that they understand that it has nothing to do with this leg. That's not how you do a kick. It's this foot whipping around. But it's not. That's another lie. I tell them that because if you don't tell them to turn this foot, you get this. They get their hips closed up and they can't do it. All right, so we tell them to turn that foot around, so we get something like that. And they spin on the heel, and they jump up in the air and do it, and they do all kinds of things that are goofy, but they start to get the hips open. So what am I saying about hard enough? Well, like, if I let the foot turn and really rip like a full power kick, that's cool. I gave it everything I got. 100% full power kick. But there's such a thing as hard enough. If I just cheat my foot out a little bit, maybe even cheat it out like 90 degrees, and I don't move it at all, and I just do that, you tell me that wouldn't hurt somebody's leg? That you have to swing with the hands. They tell you got to swing for full power, or you got to post for defense. You're telling me that if someone was blocking a punching combo and you went, that wouldn't hurt their leg? Of course it would hurt their leg. No, I didn't chop straight over. No, I didn't turn that foot, but you know what I did do? I did give this little guy here a little whoop, whoop, right? Woo, right at the end. Right at the end, see if you can see it. There's a little moment of, woo, like a little extra, woo, little 10% on that 90% kick. I'm putting that last 10% on that 90% kick and getting that hip pop. Boom. That's what makes the kick hard enough. So that's what the foot turned, out cheated already, which sort of kind of tells the guy that you're going to kick. But what if I have it, I don't know that I could nail one pointed just like this. That's what those beginners do when they mess this kick up. But even just like 45, not even, to the outside, you go to that leg muscle, and if you can do this at the end, at the right moment, with the right timing, with control over your hip, that kick is hard enough. And people are going to be like, oh, you're coming up, and oh, you're not turning, you're not opening your hip. And it's just weird to me that people can be so married to the idea of one way to do a technique when we have so much evidence to the contrary. We have professional fighters at the highest levels and tons of footage of street fights of people getting knocked out with that. With the knocker outer with his hands down and his chin out and using his arm while he's off balance and knocking a person unconscious. It's madness to me to be like, no, the correct way is that your elbow has to come up to here, and this has to do that, and then you have to do this. Technique is so overrated. Tactic, strategy, and principle is so important. Technique is not. It's just, I think it boils down to one of two things. I think it's weird when it's the comment sections. I don't know what people get out of that. I don't know why people feel the need that strangers on the internet know that you know very much about fighting. You're not trying to help anybody. You're just trying to tear people down or make sure that everyone knows that you're the shit. But it doesn't make any sense. We see people get knocked out with this all the time. That would hurt. It looked terrible, but it would hurt. But I did say that you should. You should turn your foot. And when I say you, let's qualify who I'm talking about. Right? It's you who's trying to learn how to do this stuff. Right? You're trying to learn what's the correct way. I think you should turn that foot. If you were new here, I would tell you just turn your foot. Leave your arm still and turn your foot. Got a whole video on how to learn the hook. I'll link it up there. Just turn your foot, leave your arm still, and you'll get better at the hook this way. With the kick, step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4, and you'll get better at the kick. Now, who I'm not talking to is if you have great success doing it another way. Now, great success does not mean talking on Facebook and YouTube and Instagram about how you know that this is the correct way. I'm talking about, are you knocking adults unconscious with it? Are you training people who are then knocking adults unconscious with it? If you are, great, cool, don't turn your foot. Not talking to you. Now, what will probably happen is if you learn like this, letting that foot turn. I don't turn my foot. I'm a huge hypocrite. I tell the guys, I'm like, turn that foot, turn that foot. Why? Because they haven't knocked people out with their hook. They're not having a lot of success with it. It doesn't look good. It doesn't come fast. It doesn't, hit hard. It's not doing what it's supposed to be doing. I want them to turn the foot until they learn how to actually put some of that into it, When you can do that, you don't have to turn that foot. I could probably punch harder letting my foot turn, all right, than I can without. But when you don't turn the foot, same with the kick. If I don't turn the foot, all right, the benefit is the kick comes out quicker and I recover faster. Same with the hook. That's the benefit to not turning the foot. So you shouldn't turn your foot. Unless you should, which in that case, do it. But if you don't need to, don't.